Rock bottom. In the early 2000s, rock bottom meant homelessness, zero connections, and no safety net. While that sounds like the absolute worst place you could be, it wasn't exactly the way people imagine it today. And that difference matters more than you think. I'll explain why later, because here's the part most people don't remember. The early 2000s felt cheap, but only if you were above the floor. Being in this class was like trying to survive on dial-up internet while the world was quietly switching to broadband. Everything loaded slowly for you, and by the time you got connected, the opportunity had already moved on. You're surviving on a few dollars a day while the rest of society casually spends $3 on CDs, $5 on Starbucks, and $60 on Xbox 360 games without a second thought. While everyone else is upgrading from flip phones to iPhones and DVDs to Blu-ray, your entire life is reduced to one objective: make it to tomorrow. What's really wild is that surviving back then required skills most people today don't even realize they've lost. If you needed cash, you had several options. You could panhandle, but come on, you know that's the level 1 homeless method. So you learn an instrument or a magic trick you could perform on the street. And if you really wanted to move up the wealth ladder, you might dumpster dive behind a GameStop, for example, and flip valuable goods at a pawn shop or sites like Craigslist or eBay. Paycheck to paycheck. At this level, the worst part wasn't being broke, it was knowing one tiny mistake could end everything. You weren't unemployed, you had a job. On paper, you were doing what you were supposed to do. But living paycheck to paycheck in the early 2000s meant existing in a narrow lane, technically inside society, but always pressed up against the guardrail. You weren't starving. Food was still affordable back then, which almost made it worse, because you were always one missed paycheck away from falling straight through the floor. Every decision came with a trade-off. Do you pay rent or fix the car? Buy groceries or reload your prepaid Nokia? And while you're doing this math in your head, gas prices rise. Rent creeps up. Wages stay suspiciously still. If it felt like everyone else had better gear, better connections, better starting stats, it's because they did. It wasn't that you were bad at the game. You were just locked behind a paywall that never told you the price. So you couldn't take risks. You couldn't invest in yourself. And you definitely couldn't afford mistakes. And socially, you felt it there too. People talked about their new iPods, funny vines, their MySpace pages, growing DVD collections. You were in the room, but slightly out of sync, like you joined the conversation a few seconds too late. Because poverty at this level wasn't just financial. It was isolation. You probably worked a dead-end job like stocking shelves at Circuit City or Kmart, or maybe clean dishes at All-Star Cafe. Depressing. Working class. The lower class in the early 2000s lived just above disaster mode. Not drowning, but always treading water. You had a better job. That was the difference. Low-level sales, a warehouse job, or an entry-level trade. On a good month, you could cover rent, keep the lights on, and maybe put a little aside, as long as nothing went wrong. And that nothing part was doing a lot of work. Your car was reliable, but invisible. A used Civic, an old Ford, your phone still weighed 20 pounds and your internet was slow. Your TV was pixely. Everything technically worked, right up until the moment it didn't. And when something broke, the stress hit immediately. Not panic, pressure, because you knew exactly what it would cost you. Clothes weren't impulse buys. They were planned. Vacations were rare, and when they happened, they were road trips or couches at a relative's place. Emergencies didn't wipe you out, but they left a mark. If this class had a strategy, it was optimization. Coupons. Overtime. Timing bills just right, careful planning. Not to get ahead, just to avoid slipping backward. Here's the part that's easy to miss. Doing okay wasn't a stepping stone. It was the goal. Because at this level, stability felt like success, even though it could vanish the second something went wrong. Regular people. The middle class in the 2000s sat at the balance point. This was like being rich in 2026. Lol, just kidding. but not really. Life for you is stable, comfortable, predictable, and for a while it felt permanent. Life followed a reliable script, a modest suburban house which you actually owned and didn't have a 200-year mortgage on, a decent ride in the driveway, and maybe even a few toys like motorbike or a small boat, a landline that actually rang, cable TV, a dial-up, or early broadband if you were a little ahead of the curve. You could afford dinners at Applebee's, Chili's, or Olive Garden without doing mental math. Friday nights meant grabbing one of the new Star Wars from Blockbuster. Best Buy for new music. Phone upgrades happened every few years, not every release cycle. Money mattered, but it didn't hover over every decision. Jobs were steady and had a real opportunity. Teachers, office workers, journeymen, tradespeople, good sales roles. You traded time for income and the trade felt fair. Predictable hours, predictable raises, a real future, and because of that, you experienced the decade fully. Eminem, 50 Cent and Green Day on repeat, seeing The Matrix in theaters in 3D, watching Kobe and Tom Brady take over in real time. But here's the quiet catch. You were comfy, not powerful, secure, but replaceable, and no one at the time realized how fragile that balance actually was. Well off. In the early 2000s, this is where you finally got breathing room, real breathing room. You lived in a nice neighborhood, maybe a 2-car garage, possibly a pool. Your kids went to private schools. Christmas was generous, not excessive, but memorable in a way that stuck. Vacations weren't a luxury, they were expected. Disney World or Universal, cruises. Europe if you were ambitious. You earned a strong 6 figures through being a physician, college professor, small business ownership, or being an airline pilot. You had the coolest tech in your circle, flat-screen plasma TVs, a laptop and a premium Canon or Nikon digital camera. You invested cautiously, planned carefully. You understood money, even if you didn't obsess over it. You started to mimic the wealthy or kept up with the Joneses. Fancy restaurants, designer brands, top-tier experiences. Not to show off, at least not consciously, but because that world was close enough to touch. However, you paused before spending. You didn't fly private, but likely business class. You didn't buy mansions on impulse. You weren't reckless, you were aware. You were still in the rat race. But for the first time, the finish line felt visible. Quiet wealth. Affluence or quiet wealth was comfort that had hardened into confidence. Money stopped raising your cortisol. It became a tool. Bills didn't matter anymore. Choices did. You lived in what people casually called a mini mansion, maybe gated, maybe on the water. You traveled internationally several times a year. You ate at Michelin star spots. But the real shift wasn't what you bought. It was what you outsourced. Time, friction, inconvenience. You paid people to clean, cook, drop the kids off, whatever. You weren't famous. You weren't on magazine covers or the Forbes list. Yet, most people wouldn't recognize your name, but that was kinda the point. Your money created buffers, options, silence. And while others worried about notions like the 2008 financial crisis or Great Recession, you prepared for them and laughed about it with your peers. Quietly. Because at this level, wealth wasn't gaudy, it was secure. And that security changed the way you moved through the world. Millionaire. In the early 2000s, being a millionaire meant crossing a psychological line, not quote-unquote rich on paper, but untouchable in how you move through the world. But how did you get here? Most likely, you put in your time as a university professor, maybe played on a pro sports team, were a successful lawyer, or helped found a tech startup. Through these roles, you earned 7 figures. Your assets outweigh liabilities. You're living lavish almost anywhere. You had sports cars, multiple homes, and mingled with celebrities. While expensive cities like Los Angeles or Monaco still bite, they don't scare you anymore. And here's the shift most people miss. Your money stops reacting to life and starts anticipating it. Wealth is diversified. Property, stocks, businesses. Decisions stretch years ahead. Elite education, early retirement, legacy. Money loses its emotion and becomes strategic. This is the level where people bought Blackberries and iPhones before they were cool, flew private while everyone else squeezed into economy, and watched the dot-com crash unfold on CNBC without panic. You weren't chasing trends, you were insulated from them. Because once you crossed this line, money stopped being about survival or status. It became leverage, and that changed everything. Rich. Being genuinely rich back then meant you were a multi-millionaire. Not just wealthy, they operated in a different universe. 8 figures, sometimes more. Enough distance from money that it stopped defining your schedule. Homes scattered across the globe. Investments stacked in layers most people never see. You worked if you wanted to, or not at all. But here's the real separation. Chaos lost its power over you. Market swings became background noise. Recessions were something you watched, not something you felt. Whether the money came from being a partner at a corporation, inheriting it, being a star player on a sports team, none of it really mattered anymore. This is where people owned courtside season tickets instead of watching ESPN highlights, where the mall never closed. Louis V bags brushed past Abercrombie cologne clouds. The world still moved fast, but you moved a bit faster and had a head start. At this level, wealth didn't just buy comfort, it bought insulation. And once you had that, you didn't really have to follow the rules of society anymore. Billionaire. At the start of the 21st century, billionaire wasn't just a title. They existed outside normal reality. If millionaires owned homes, billionaires owned the pouring company, the siding company, the architecture firm, and the home insurance broker. Millions felt abstract. Tens of millions felt logistical. Their capital moved markets, funded the core technology we obsess over today, and quietly rewired culture itself. This is the level where names appeared on buildings instead of credit cards, where private jets sat on tarmacs while CNN headline news looped in the background, while people debated Napster, Windows XP, and the future of the internet. The billionaires were the ones funding the outcome. The rest of the world was watching Apple keynotes or Amazon stock crawl across the ticker, but you were already positioned on the other side of the trade. Most people trade time for money. Millionaires trade money for leverage. Billionaires trade money for time. And once you reach that level, you're no longer playing capitalism's games. You're deciding which games should exist at all. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, remember to hit the like and subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, cheers!